just a Saturday night again, and what we have here is Geoff's Squier by Fender Telecaster. I don't know the name of this model, but it's one of they with the two humbuckers. And this was bought online and it was bought new online. And Geoff got it and just felt, ooh, it doesn't feel right, and didn't like it. So he did some measuring or checking the evenness of the frets, because there was choking going on all over here. And discovered there were some significantly high frets, and in fact you can see some of the high, little fly again, see some of the high frets here very clearly. Look at those, those terrible. So he had a go at leveling them, and he had a go at hammering them back down, which created some accidental marks, although he hit it with some piece of plastic, but the plastic was hard enough for maybe the hammer just snuck across. But anyway, it wasn't successful, so it's down here to be salvaged. Now, you can see that it's left some serious marks on the neck, but you can also see, you know, I can try and fret level them down, but look at the height these frets are standing up, and it just feels like a mess. Now, what I noticed in checking the radius of this guitar, it's an absolute dog's dinner of fretting. So you look down here and there's flat spots all the way, there is a flat spot all the way down this neck. Now that could be in part because the frets were radiused. Sorry about this camera work. Little fly, go away. It in part could be because the frets might have been radiused to something tighter than the board, but it leaves this bit down the middle which is standing proud in a lot of cases. Now, if I just zoom out, the question really we had from the start with this is this savable the way it is, or does it require fret replacement? And so what I've been doing in a couple of minutes before putting the camera on was just having a look. I mean, I had a play last night, and all the notes up here are lost and choked out. And I got my fret rocker out here. It's not a brilliant one, but it is such a massive unevenness still all the way down here. It isn't the best surface, I've got to tell you, right? But it's enough to give us a clue. I mean, yikes, that's pretty bad. So if I were, I'm not get a very good reading off it, but if I was to measure here, that's saying, I don't know what it's saying. I can never trust what it reads off here. But 130, even though some's been taken off, so it's a good fair bit high that it's 130 even after Geoff has taken some off it, because looks like he's had a go at leveling after that. So it's one of those things. Can I find it in my heart to carry on working with this? You know, there's kind of a couple of issues here. There's price and there's time and so on and so forth. Now, if we look down here, there is some unevenness here, but probably within the realms of being able to take it out with leveling. So it's not astonishingly bad, but it does go a bit wrong down here from about here onwards. Now the question I've got is it worth refretting? Is expensive. I mean, but these are horribly messed up, and I don't normally do partial refrets, but so my temptation is to try and eke it out. Yeah, you know, like I said, it's an expensive undertaking. There are a few other little things that need taking care of on here, and I've got a picture on that camera, which is now taking the video, which I would be referring to, but I can remember them all. So the question is if the worst frets are right here, that could be a saving grace, because we could potentially get away with oh dear, I can feel kinked. That's taken a blow somewhere. That's probably going to break sometime soon. Yeah, so the question is can I save these frets as they stand? I think what I'm going to do is a bit unusual sequence of events. I think whatever the costs or difficulties involved, I think I owe it to Geoff to give him the best advice possible. Well, I know that's what I owe it to him. So I'm going to do one thing or another. We're either going to level this out and successfully set up the guitar without refretting, or holy cow, what is wrong with this? Right, or we're going to have to advise that it needs refretting, or if it doesn't get refretted, then it isn't worth spending the money on my setup. And you know, my setup is not cheap, and what it means is I don't want to encourage somebody to invest that money in my setup if it's not going to really produce a great result. I mean, I can get a good setup, but if at the end of it, if the frets are pretty worn down to nothing, then you've kind of put the guitar closer to the end of its playing life without much option for the future. So the reason I'm taking this neck off straight away, which I don't normally do in this sequence, obviously, but I'm taking the neck off. This has got a few. This is a Friday special. Do you know that? There's a missed hole there, or maybe I can't say that because maybe Geoff has taken it off and on at some point that I don't know about. Anyway, but there's a few kind of errors and mistakes in here. Okay, so what I'm going to look to do is I'm going to look to do a bit of an old-fashioned style setup. Now, I can't really trust that, so let's not trust the frets in this case because we know they're totally wonky. Oh, then we know there's problems. So what I'm going to look at is see if we can get ourselves we want to get a level neck. And then, as I say, as an unusual step, I'm going to look at radiusing this with a 9.5 inch that thingy radius block. Now this is set flat right now, so I can go and get the 9.5 inch radius block, and what that will allow me to see very quickly is whether or not this I'll put some marker on here. It will show me just how far off these frets are, because if some of them still need more work, it'll show up pretty quickly. So this is a sort of diagnostic run past it, and if it shows up that the far end is in good shape, then that's cool. It'll also show up pretty quickly if the frets are radius to something noticeably other than 9.5 inch radius, because the fingerboard is 9.5 inch radius. I've checked that already. So it's a bit of diagnostics. Now, as an outside thing, I have a set of nearly matching fret wire here, which is as close as makes no difference. But obviously I'm not really going to leap into doing this unless I'm convinced it's what we need to do. So let's have a scrape up and down here and see what the runes are going to tell us. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put it there at an angle, and I'll bring the camera around so we can observe it together through the majesty of whatever, digital photo vision. So cutting all the way, nearly all the way, missing a bit of a low spot in the middle where it's not cutting, it's cutting the edges. So we're changing already. We're changing already from, these are pretty much 9.5 inch. These are flatter than 9.5, so they're, don't know what they are. These are, that one's okay, that one's cutting nicely. And then we get right down this troublesome end, and we've got a bit of a thing going on here. Now, I don't think it's too many miles off rescuing it, but the point is, this sandpaper hasn't yet shown the extent to which this is high, so we would have to continue working this for a little while to get an impression of how much higher it is than it should be. But we can just, where are we? We can just do that. We're allowed. because, you know, worst comes to the worst, it's a re-fret. Best comes to the best, we can save it from its ruins and it'll be worth doing the setup on. Okay, so I'm looking at our... Okay, now that's interesting. That's interesting. This is showing up as not as far out, not as far out as I thought. What we've got here is a flat spot on the board as we have all the way down, or most of the way down the board. That's showing up a lot of problems. So what I'm actually doing right now is here, I'm more getting rid of the marks that Geoff accidentally put in it. So that we've kind of moved on to a possible saving of the day. Now these here are showing up as being either pressed a bit more firmly into the flat spots, which is why they're probably missing them. That may not be the end of the world. Let's just do a bit of kind of checking. It's not too bad. I think we get away with all of this down here. And that's not a lot of material taken. Good. From there it's okay. A little bit rockier as we come up here. Let's try and use the better side. A little bit. A little bit. So as soon as we get down to about here, it's a little bit more uneven. So I'm just going to try and give it a little bit more of a attention here. And then I'm going to go to the far end and just check these. Okay. Still a bit off, but that's because that's a dip rather than... So I think what Geoff may have achieved in hitting it may have knocked one of these further in. I can't really tell. But the question is it retrievable, or will it kind of permanently spoil the playability? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of be a bit heavier handed on this end now, with a view to seeing if we can get somewhere very close to workable. Now it's kicked up a fair bit of dust, but that's only a 400 grit piece of sandpaper, so it's not doing as much bad as it looks. So what we've discovered is that the board itself is in a bad state. In other words, it's got a flat spot running all the way down the middle, which makes the frets look bad, but obviously they were also quite a bit uneven, resulting in Geoff having to take a lumpen hammer to them. Now I think these are almost savable now. Well, not almost, they are savable from there. I mean, this end one here is pretty heavily hit, and it has been whacked, so there's a low spot there where it's been hit, but that's not the end of the world. So let's try now, put it back on, and we'll aim to set it back up with the frets as such. Now I haven't finished leveling because I want to do a precision level as well. In a way that might be a little bit easier now because we've done sort of a basic radius block. Now normally, as you may have seen before, I wouldn't do a radius block level on a guitar like this. The only time I ever use a radius block level is when I've put the frets in myself, and it's time to, you know, there's a kind of gross leveling to be done, and that's when I'll use it, maybe to get rid of the bulk of obvious unevenness, and then follow up with a precision leveling. So in a way I'm doing that here because we've got this known problem. So I'm going to reattach the neck, and then we'll restring. Wow, do you know what, it's 16 degrees in here already. It's hard to believe. Now that kicks, get out of my hair, little creature. That kicks in quite tight down the end here. I'm not sure that was even done up very well before. Just a little bit concerned that those screws may not be very strong biters. It's not really the right word to describe them, but anyway, so I'm going to preserve and reuse now these what I call sacrificial strings. We might as well. I think these are 9s by the looks of things. The difficulty of reusing strings is almost always, as you can tell, you get them off or undone, and the curly bits at the end just get in the way of everything. And especially with a split post tuner like this, the curly bits are quite knotted, so the only way you're ever going to get them separated from each other is to straighten out them curly bits, and in doing so you weaken the whole thing, which is why you have to do it to reuse them, but that's why you wouldn't really want to use these strings again. So sometimes customers can be a little bit surprised that when they bring a guitar and they've got pretty new strings on it, I'll say, well, I'm still going to replace them, because even getting them off is going to, or it is disentangling them in like this is going to put stress on them, and they're likely to break. And the last thing I want to do is give a customer back a nicely set up guitar with a sort of fresh playing feel, with the likelihood that it's going to break. So having straightened that out, I can now extract it from all of the other ones. What I'm also going to do is while I'm putting it back on, I'm going to cut back the amount of run-on that we're using here, because we don't need this much. So it's just excess stuff. Now I'm going to cheat and use the doer-upper, because we might as well, and it gets done quicker. So with any guitar, I'm sort of looking at the nut from the beginning, and I'm saying to myself, is this in good enough condition to use? First of all, what is it made of? If it's anything but tusk, I will replace it. In this case, believe it or not, it actually looks like it's tusk. Well, the problem with not knowing, because it claims to be a synthetic bone. I think it claims to be. I haven't looked at this model on the catalogue pages or whatever. But so if it's synthetic bone, then it's not a bad material, but it's not got the Teflon component that makes me like tusk, you see. So I guess I come to the point where I mean the change of nut is featured in the price of the setup anyway, but occasionally I can make it a little cheaper for the customer if they've already got a tusk nut fitted, and if there's enough room in that configuration currently to cut the saddles down a bit better, the slots down a bit better than they currently are, to get the right first fret action. But if none of those things are true, any of those things aren't true, then it makes sense to replace it with what I know is a tusk nut, has the Teflon component, and we'll end up at exactly the right first fret action, which is critical to how the guitar plays. And for those who have not been bored to death by me saying this a million times over in the past, the role of the first fret action height in your guitar playing in tune is quite significant. I found that anything over at a first fret action of anything over 0.5 of a millimeter, notes played down by the nut tend to go sharp as you fret them, which may be only a small amount, but what it does is it sets up a difference between the fretted notes, which are all sharp by the same amount, and the other notes, the unfretted notes, which are kind of in tune with each other. And those two groups of in tune with each other but out of tune with the each group, those two things sound horrible together. So getting the correct first fret action is critical from that playing in tune point of view. Getting the nut material right is critical from the general staying in tune point of view, because if the strings are held up in even the slightest bit of friction in the nut, your guitar will struggle to stay in tune, or it will quickly go out of tune as soon as you start playing it, and it will keep on doing it. Sometimes if the nut slots are really grippy, and the kind you'll hear them pinging when they are like that, but if they are badly grippy, then they will stay putting your guitar out of tune for years, in fact until you change the strings. There's no stretching out that will ever solve that problem. So getting that right from the beginning is critically important, and that's what I always do. I take care of both those things by first of all changing the nut to a tusk one, and then secondly making sure that it's installed in a way that the first fret action on all the frets is only 0.3 of a mils, my target first fret action, and that keeps it well under the danger zone of going sharp. And the other bonus or benefit of doing that, which is maybe a bit more subtle, is that coming off, don't you dare. A bonus benefit, I hate these things. So is that broken or is that pinged off? Right, I'm just going to change this for a spare cheapie. Sometimes you can't reuse the high E string because it's just how would I say it? It is just too coiled and already weakened. So I've got a set of strings here in which none are probably the high E. I did have a little pouch of high E strings kicking around. It's not those. Get those in the bin because that's no use sticking around here. These are nickel plated Harley Bentons, which I rarely, if ever, use. So it looks like my pile of little high E's are, for the time being, missing. That's okay because I've got some more. So let's shove these in a different place and shove some of these in the bin and some of these somewhere else. So these are 10s. They're no good. I'll just quickly check and see if I've got a single 9 anywhere or a spare 10, because it doesn't really make that much difference at that size. So I'm in the store cupboard now, looking through the stuff. And there's a G. I don't want that. There's some 11s. There's a what? What's this pack? There's a 9, but it's a whole pack. It seems a shame. Yeah. What we got here? Anything? No. Fat strings. 9s. Electric horrible 9s. Let's see if there's one in here. Not disparaging the kind person who sent me these. I'm just saying they're not that great, but they're fine for this purpose when one breaks in the setup. Anyhow, so there's that. Sometimes it can end up being easier just to get a new string than to try and push some of these back through either a Strat style stringing or a Telecaster through body. So sometimes a new set of strings, cheap strings, it makes more sense than trying to reuse old ones. But it's not often that I have to be in that position, because most of the time we'd just be in a position to use the strings already on there. We didn't in this case because of the need to take the neck off first of all. Now this doesn't want to go through for some reason. I don't know why that is. Oh, how strange. Has this got a ball caught in there or something? No. It's a little bit offset or something, and it's not massively keen on going all the way through. Oh, lordy. How boring is this? Now, come through in the wrong place. Now it's through. If you do get stuck and it will not go through, the trick is to get a little piece of either a very fine piece of shrink tubing and push that through first, and then slip the fine high E string through and use the tubing as a kind of conduit, and then take the tubing out once the string's through. Or go away. I think it must be spring and these little creatures are hatching. Mosquito. Caught him. Let him go. That's clever of me. Oh, grasshopper. Anyhow. Right. Now, where were we? Where was I? So, okay. So we've gone a funny way around things, but now we come to the place that I would normally want to be at. Now, looking at the first fret at this action, it looks okay, but as I said, I don't know what the material is. So I've got Tusk 9.5s here. Should I need it? Maybe this will come out. Let's see if this will come out first. If it comes out, now I know that Geoff said he had a problem with it. It came out or sank back in the wrong way or something weird. Anyway, we'll just take a quick look if we can tap it out. This one's loose, so give it a quick tighten up. A few little oddities. So let's get a little go at this. Small hammer. I've lost track of where it was now. Oh yeah, so normally, yeah, so we've had the neck off in order to take care of the, or check out the frets and give them a, if you like, a diagnostic leveling. So this doesn't want to move, so that's making a mockery of that. Let's just check something here. It's back to front. That's what it looks like for a start. That is the weirdest thing. Oh. Well, are we? Is it going to come out or isn't it? Somewhere I had my old. Here they are. The old. These, I've replaced these now. My old fret pullers. So I'm going to see if this wants to come up, and it doesn't. So this is glued in fairly firmly. So if we're going to replace this, it's going to have to be a removal job. I'm going to do it because I want it to be right, and I think by the time I get the action set down here, I've got a bad feeling there isn't going to be any clearance here anyway, so I think we better take it out. Now I've already done the tapping, so that's for somebody who's going to say, I can't believe you took a Dremel to a guitar or to a nut, and I have tapped it already and nothing happened. Okay, so I didn't achieve my desired outcome that way, so we're going to need to use another method. All right, and that method is a tried and tested method that I have done many a time and oft with no harm whatsoever, and it will be done not with this one, with the other one. Be done with a Dremel and a Dremel fine cutting disc. It just means that I can break apart the nut without damaging the. On Teles and Strats, there's a very vulnerable piece of finish here, or not finished wood, and if you are not careful, pulling a nut out pulls a chunk of that out and you'll be sorry. So rather than do that, knowing I'm after a perfect playing nut, which is the sort of bottom line for what I'm doing, I'm going to take it out the safest way, and that's this way, even if it sounds a bit loud and scary to you. All right, it's not to me. All right, so always with the two hands, and it's spinning because it's not done up enough. Might have to try and tighten this up a bit. You may not want to do that. I may have to find another one that isn't slipping. Oh no, well, yes, no. No, this isn't the working one. This doesn't grip. There's another cutter here which is a bit bigger. I may have left the one I really need. No, here it is. Let's do that one. Yeah, I think I ought to throw this one away because it doesn't hold the disc anymore. So it's a bit of a waste of time. Bin. No point trying it and then having to come back and changing it. Better. Okay, so that looks horrible. Bits of plastic all over the place, and then we just grab a hold of it like this and squeeze it inwards, and that breaks off a bit of it usually, which we usually then can remove safely. So the one thing you can't know exactly is where the where the bottom of the slot is when you're drilling. So that's the only place you can occasionally go down too low, and that ends up just touching out the rosewood area underneath. And that, usually it's only just a touch if you do it at all, and that doesn't interfere with the next nut seating on there, even if it's a little tiny depression sort of thing. So, but I would rather take this action and remove the nut this way without risking this rosewood falling off the back, which is, as I say, quite a common and depressing end result. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit further with this. And this is with the hope of just breaking this apart now. And then if I'm really nervous about cutting into the floor of the slot, then what I can do is, bits coming off, that's not really what I want. I can then get a saw and cut it down, which will help things, but it's also, I suppose, a little bit more manageable, so you can see where it's going to. A little razor saw. And again, the idea, I suppose, being is if you cut through too far with this razor saw, your bits coming off, you're still relatively safe. You know, it's not a major impression on the underlying thing. This has been glued in quite a bit, I think, judging by this. So, chance of getting this out is going to be a little bit more hard work. So what I'm going to look for now is some finer, or a finer screwdriver bit, just something I can tap under the end here. That's going to require me holding it up with my body like this, and I'm going to just come at it with a little bit of a tap from here, and then we get a bite to begin with. Okay, comes out. Now, it was tusk, I think, which is fine, but it looks like it's got quite a bit of gluing in there. So that's okay. I don't mind. I'd rather be able to fit my own new one and make it the right height than what often can be the case when you try and save one, is that you end up putting quite a bit of time into cutting an existing one down to size or to fit and get it to the right action, and only to find that you can't ultimately get there for some reason or other, and then you're kind of into fitting a new nut anyway. Okay, so that's all right. We'll just do this the normal way. That's interesting. That's unusual. That is a little bit, I would say, on the what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit on the loose side. Not great. So that's a little bit of a challenge. Now, it probably would be cured by as little as a couple of bits of foil standing in there, but I don't like a loose nut. I'm looking at this now, seeing if it's been worked on. No, it looks clean enough that you would declare it a factory thing. Now, what I tend to do in the case of this, now this gets a little bit of a pain, but you get out your sanding thing, and what I would make, if anything, is I'd make a little bit of a boot to go on the back. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this little piece of scrap tusk, and I'm going to sand it nice and flat so I can work with it. Could do without this part of it because it's a long-winded piece of carry-on. So now we've got a piece of scrap tusk which is still uneven, so we've got to try and just get this down to a very level, if I can, piece of scrap. And that's just a matter of careful sanding and appropriate pressure downwards in various places. So when you have a nut that's loose at all, it's not a good thing. You do not want a loose nut in the slot. So what I'm looking to do is just give this the thinnest of boots possible. So by putting on a little piece of this tusk, actually if I've got a piece here, this might even be a better piece. I've got a piece from a saddle that's longer. It would be simpler, wouldn't it? Yeah, let's use that. Let's not bother with that piece, but save that for another time because it's always handy. So I've got a flat surface here on this scrap piece of tusk, and I'm going to now stick it with some super glue to the back of this nut. By the time we've shaped this nut and got it down to the right size, barely any of this material will remain, but what is there I can then use it to just bulk out this gap so our nut fits in there and stays snug. And this is where the super glues start to fail. You have a pot of super glue and within a period of time it hardens or locks itself in the bottle, and then it just turns into a solid lump of unusable stuff. So we're nearly there with this stuff. Now, anticipating that, I've got a load of single-use ones over there which I'm going to end up using. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to put a little bit of glue onto the back surface here for starters. And then I'm going to, hopefully, if I can see it, press on my spare scrap piece like so. Not the best vice function in the world, but hopefully with a bit of pressing down that will do the business. Now, a little thin skin of tusk like this should be, see, look, it's leaking out. It comes out at you. How does it do that? It's like a beast escaping from its lair. It's got to escape. It's got to. Yeah. So yeah, when this is done, it'll be a very, very thin little piece of, like a skin, that you would hardly notice unless you looked at it very, very closely. But it will be enough to keep this nut in a sort of snug position, because you don't want a nut that wobbles or leans over. It's the worst thing. Now I've got a bit of excess here that I should cut off. Pow. Okay, so this little piece that's widening is going to be lost in the bottom of there, which is fine. So what I'm going to do now is, with my fresh piece of stuff, which I made up the other day, I'm now going to just try and very carefully reduce this down to what we want. And it's incredible that it will be as thin as a sheet of paper, in fact even less than that by the time it's at the right thickness. So it is the very smallest amount. It's nuts how small it is, really. There's something here. Yes. And I call it a kind of, I suppose it's a kind of shim, isn't it? But I call it a boot or a helping hand. So just now getting down. One of the things that can sometimes cause it to peel back is when you have an edge like this sticking up, and if you don't sand it back the correct direction, you can pull it off where it's fitted to. Okay, that's okay, and we'll do the same at this end, just till it's now flush with the original nut. And then we'll just sort of join it up, blend it in, and then I will keep on sanding. And as you've probably heard me talk about before, the sanding dance is a tribal swaying dance for getting a consistent sand with the thing remaining in the right angle. So if you move your arms backwards and forwards trying to sand something, your hands move and the angle will change. If you set the angle with your hands that you kind of know it's got to be like so, then if you're prepared to move the whole of you side to side, you'd be amazed how straight your grip remains because you're not risking changing it. Okay, so this little very thin bit here, again, it's now way too wide, but we will change that when it comes down to it. That will change because it will get thinner and thinner. Now you might say to me, Samuel, why don't you put in a piece of paper? Just because I'm fussy and I don't want to put a piece of paper in here. I want there to be a piece of the same material I'm using. You got that? Yes. Now that leaves me with a small blending problem. Because there's a little bit here where you may just see the thing, but we'll kind of blend that in with a file later on. So we're kind of getting there. The difficult part is to get the thickness to come down evenly all round, which when you're dealing with the sheet of paper thickness is quite difficult to do, but you know, you can get there if you're careful. And this is what it takes. Like I say, I think for me the importance of this nut not moving, you only need the tiniest amount of looseness before the nut moves worryingly in the slot. And the problem is here, either this is a non-standard slot on this guitar, and I'm not really sure why that would be unless somebody's already changed a nut. I mean, I have a feeling, maybe I could be wrong, but this model may come with a tusk nut, or it may have been, who knows, fitted at the retailers. But either way, this seems a bit slightly out of size. And when you have an oversized nut slot, it is a big pain because you do have to spend quite a bit of effort deciding what you're going to do, because if you don't find a strap nut, these tusk nuts are built for drop-in strap replacements, inverted commas drop-in, and if one of these won't fit a Squier Strat, then you won't find too many others that will. So in a way you're kind of doomed with the prospect of having to fit a custom or make a custom nut for this, which I can tell you is a laborious process, and it's more laborious and tiresome even than this, and this is pretty long-winded. So not quite sure what happened to this guitar and the nut on it, but it's not really made anything easier for us. So we're not far off. But if you get to see this up close in a minute, you'll see that it's practically wafer thin. You can probably see through it actually. It's so thin. Anyway, and that's only the beginning of the process, because the next most important bit is to size the nut to the correct height. And that will be a pain. But once that's done, we've still got all the rest of the setup to do. So you can see this is a sort of fairly involved business to get the nut right. But I suppose once you've done this a few times and you sort of start to see what ideally the kind of care and attention that would go into getting a nut right, I think you start to also get to see why probably so few companies, factories do it, because it's a complicated thing. So there's no surprise, it's complicated for a reason, and so I don't imagine too many factories will be spending time in finalising the nut height and fitment to the degree that we are here. So not far away, and there is so little of this material left. It's kind of ridiculous, really. You can actually read the tusk sign through there. I mean, it's paper thin now, but it's as much as it takes to get this to sit snugly, nearly. And much more, and we will be either completely through or almost through. Wow, it's peeling off there because it's so thin. That's mad. So we're very nearly at the height to drop it in. Oh, almost. Well, I mean, if I take much more off this, we may just find that we've got nothing left, frankly. And that may conclude that shimming it or booting it with this sort of material just may be too small a difference here to make it even worth doing. Okay, I think we're almost there. Now, what we could do is just doubly ensure that the surfaces in here are also dead clean and free of all possible remaining detritus, glue and so on. And that, again, is quite tricky to do because you've got a blade is a good flat surface for that, but it tends not to want to get the middle of the nut, so I tend to bend the blade a little bit and sort of force it into the middle. So we're almost there. If I were to tap that in. Now what I could do is, this sounds silly, but now we could just flatten out this side of the nut, because this is more now controllable and we don't run the risk of shaving off the remaining stuff. So we could do that, and then we get a much better run at it, which is almost there. So a little tiny bit more on this side. And then we're onto the height aspect next. Okay, let's have a look. That's pretty good. Just do a little tiny bit more without it all falling to bits, hopefully. I've just done it. I've just broken a piece off it. Look at that. Would you believe it? That's how tiny. What do I just do with this? That's how tiny it is. Or how thin it is. Let's put this little tiny piece back. Stop escaping. So, sizing nuts, a pain, a right pain. Now that's partly come around because I've been trying to sand it down from the other side. So, let's avoid that. I'm just going to sand this a little bit more to smooth over that little repair I just did. Okay, that has got to be nearly as thin as anything could possibly go. Right, that's seated. Get rid of this. Let's get rid of... Oh, no, we need that. So the next job, believe it or not, is calculating the amount we need to reduce the nut by. So to do this, we're going to need to grip hold of. Right, we're going to need to cut this stuff off. Thank you. And release this side. Thank you. Thank you. It's suddenly, at the point you need it to come apart, it suddenly becomes the unstickiest substance, I mean the stickiest substance in the world that wants to hold on at all costs. Look at it. It just will not cut off now. So I'm going to have to cut my way down each one of them. And then it's still the hardest substance in the world. Right. So what I'm going to do now is get these things out the way. I'm going to put the strings back in and do them up again, and let's see where the nut sits. I want to make sure that it sits all the way down. And then we're going to measure the first fret action. So what I'm going to do at this point, I think it's probably worth setting this to, roughly to pitch. Caught under a fret. That seems to be coming undone. Okay, so let's look at the action here. We're not far off the right action, so that's good. For once, it just means I'll have a bit less to do. But we get the thingies. Space things. You know what I mean? These. Okay, so the idea now is I'm going to check the height of the gap either end and write it down. Important information. Ugh. Wrong container. I'd say that's 0.7, just 0.8. So 0.8 on the bass side, 0.7 on the treble side. We want 0.4, that's minus 0.3. You'll agree with me, and that's minus 1.3, that's minus 0. No, silly boy, 0.4, and that's minus 0.5. Those are our removal targets. You understand what I'm doing, don't you? Good. So we slack all these off all of a sudden. Okay, now I'm going to very gently remove this. Now, this is this, this is that. Now this is tricky. We've got to come down 0.4. All right, I'm going to only got one place to mark it, or to measure it on this, which is different. Normally I'll do it on two ends on a flat bottom one, but here we can only really safely take it from the midpoint because it's the only surface that we have got as a guide right now. 5.14 is our midpoint mark, 5.14, and we need to take it down until it is, take away, let's do 0.4 to be safe. So 0.4 is 5.74 plus 0.4 is 614. 614. 5.14. Yeah, 4.74 plus Right, so I'm going down to 4.74. It's currently 5.14 and I'm going down to 4.74 for my 40 hundredths of a 4/10 of a millimeter. Right, so here's the fun part. So now we have to do this in a straight way that doesn't damage the lie of the nut. So first of all, I'm going to very gently sand so that our little footing, extra bit of material, is gently ground down to flush with the edges of the nut, which it is. Okay, now I'm going to think about removing some material whilst keeping it as straight as possible. So I assume my stance, and I'm aiming to do the same amount on both sides. Then I stop, check the squareness of it, it's got to be good. That's flush over there. Come round to the front. My target is 4.74, and according to this, we're pretty much on it. Well, that didn't seem to take much, but let's trust in our measurements. Now before I put this on, there's two things I want to do. Is it only two? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully just sand and blend this edge with the piece it's leading up to. Now only at the outside edge, well, you can't really see it, but there's a very small chance that the high and low E's are just covered a tiny bit with this material, this extra thing. So I do want to just thin that out or round it off such that it's easy to just cut a little slot into it if it has to be, but that's clear at that end, and that's almost completely clear at this end. In fact, if I just do that, it's now clear. Whew. Tiny little details. Right, so that's that little bit tidied up on there. The other thing I want to do while the strings are in this position is to prep them now for precision fret leveling, which will be then another go with the banana fret leveling file. Now hopefully, I think with the radius we get most of the way there already, but it's nice to give it this little extra bit. Might as well, because it probably won't take that much because we've done a fair bit with the radius block. But while the strings are slack, let us avail ourselves of that opportunity. Now hopefully, when I put this back in here now, we won't need to remove it again, or if we do, it will be for the final time. Now, there's a tiny little overhang there, so if we do remove it, we have to remember to take a little fraction, just a rub across with the sandpaper just to flush it out, so we get rid of that little sharp bit. Now they're still catching under this fret here. I don't think we can stop that happening. That's a permanent mess up there. Short of course, replacing it, but we're trying not to do that. Now I've done something, a rookie error, which I should be alright with. But I've just got to double check the action at this end, since we've been on and off a couple of times. So that's still high. So I don't know if is that seated in properly? I don't know if that is. Suddenly it seems to be sitting up very slightly. Oh, now it's better. So we probably need to tap it in just to make sure. Rid of the dust, check up the edges. Right, that's in, nice. Okay. That's looking good. Now what I've got to just do is go back to the basic action settings. So I'll get my little devices, and at this end we now want to set to our target, desired target. Now I've discovered in my moving things around, I've changed the whole geometry of this by tightening the neck up properly. That's the first thing I noticed. So it's completely changed how the neck was seated, so that's good. So it means I've got to kind of raise the action up here a little bit more to get our target of 1.5, which is about here. Yeah, so the good news was that these aren't stripped, so I'm going to go home and throw away my El Stupido hex key that I've got at home that was giving me false readings. But these are standing up quite tall, which is okay. And the plus side of it is that you don't really get the grub screws sticking into your hands, which is quite a nice thing. Downside is it just feels like they're quite tall on their haunches. Now what I'm going to do is, while we're here, I'm just going to do these manually because I can see where they need to go to begin with, and then we'll come back and focus on the fine-tuning in a minute. So this is going to raise the action at that end very slightly too, which is not a totally bad thing, but we shall re-examine. These screws are a bit sloppy, I must say. They're not broken like I thought they were, but they're not tolerant in the slightest towards any even slightly worn hex screws. So don't come to the game with your worn out hex keys like I did. So now I'm aiming for my 1.5mm, going down in a graded curve, if you like, to 1.2. It's a very tiny difference, but it's, you know, it's never altogether perfect, but we kind of get there more or less in the end. But it does care about that difference, funnily enough. When you get to the other end and you're at the right height, that 0.3 of a mil can make absolute difference between playing and not playing. Okay, I'm going to tune, and then I'm going to look at the relief just one last time. That's quite nice. Alternative tunings. That's better. Right, last check. Neck relief, none. I think we better put some in there. We don't really have too much leeway. Where have you gone? Dun, dun, dun. The thing I need has gone. Where's it gone to? Well, if I knew it, I wouldn't be looking for it, would I? That's my box spanner, which normally lives on the wall here, and it has disparued. No, it's down the bottom. It normally lives up at the top. Huh. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of curvature into this neck by slackening the truss rod a bit, and it may have to go all the way to the end because it's at the slack point already. So I think we need to go all the way to the end of the slack point until it bites in the other direction before we're going to get any noticeable, appreciable change. And if it hasn't got a second direction and it just falls off the end, or the thing comes out, the adjuster comes off, then oh well. So I think we do have a bit of positive adjustment in this direction, although it's very difficult to do it with the string in the way. Actually, you know what? Is this really going to get there? What size am I looking at? That size there. Bear with me. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. I think the only thing that's going to happen here is this is going to fall right off. Ha! That's not so good. A one-way. Right, that's the downside. That really is that's not good at all. We've got to live with it. We have no choice. So hopefully my fret leveling method may just give us a little get out of jail on this. Now, I think that's a all-round naff. So what we've got is a neck that, even with these strings on, won't curve into a relief. And then when that happens, you expect or hope your guitar has a dual action truss rod which positively changes the neck shape in both directions. This one doesn't. If I kept turning counterclockwise on this one, the adjuster head would fall out of here. Now I'm just standing here not even noticing whether the phone's given up or not. Sorry, boringest of views ever. At least I've got the sound coming from the right thing. So just to show you, I was turning that little wee thing in there and it was heading its way out. Or it was on its way to coming right out. So it wasn't doing any positive turning in the counterclockwise department. So that basically means we're stuck with the amount of relief in the neck that we've got, or however much the strings that we use can pull into the neck. And the truth is that these nines, it isn't an awful lot. So I'm just going to double check my first fret actions. I'm happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is get my leveling beam, and we're sort of making some progress now. It's funny that so far it's been kind of remedial backpedaling. We've still got to take care of some other things like the terrible sharp fret ends, but we'll do that when the what sits off. Now I'm going to first of all I'm going to play these. Let's hear if we've got things playing. Now, the last time I played this, there were no notes up at the top end here at all. So let's get a plectrum that I like and try. Not bad. Now we also had Ben's choke outs, which we still have. So let's get on to it. So that's improvement. We've got some way into this. We've saved all those notes on the B string and the high E, and Geoff knows about those because he reported to me that they was all choked up in that department. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the magic of this beam to not only take care of any remaining unevenness, but I'm hoping that we can also get rid of what I call fret slap, which is a kind of fret buzz that seems to follow you up the neck on multiple frets, and it's caused by not by individual frets being high, but in the simplest way of putting it, by groups of frets being high. So they together kind of form little hills and valleys, and cause the string to just not have enough room to spin in, and it clips the top of those hills and valleys. So that's looking good. I'm happy with that. It's consolidated the leveling I did on the previous one. What I'll hear is all the strings playing. Yep. And now I won't know until I get to the G whether the bends are freed up. Well, they sound all right lying down, but let's keep on. Now, the thing, remember, we've got no relief, barely any relief in the neck, and that was a problem. Here's where this tool comes in. So if you look, I'm going to calibrate this again, and the idea is I'm aiming to make it exactly match the curve in the neck. But now it matches, I'm going to crank it a tiny fraction more and check it again. And what I should see in a minute is that it hits the middle one first. And I'm going to do it a little bit more until it does. And what you can get straight away, if you're with me, you'll realize that I can put slightly more bend into this. There you go, it's just skipping this one now at the end. Now I've got slightly more curvature into this tool than I've got in the actual neck, and that means when I use it gently on here, I will be cutting a little bit more in the middle, like it incorrectly in a way, but actually I want a bit more space in the middle because we can't get it through the truss rod. Now we're talking microscopic amounts of difference, but that extra little bit of bulge of this thingy beam, this tunable fret leveling beam, just means that I can get a little bit gently cut a little bit of a scoop into this section, and then I'm going to have a look. It's looking good. We're still low in here, so that's the bit we're trying to reach with. We can't adjust the neck to get to it, but I think we're going to be all right. Still, the big challenge comes now, and this is where we get to see whether we can. I'm going to keep the same calibration, even though I know it's slightly over calibrated. And now here I'm going to just try and let this tool give us again that little extra bit of cutting in right in the middle. And we're going to see how we get on with bending the notes. Now, of course, the bends tend to kick in or run into any problems at the top end here, so we've got to make sure that this is also even, and I think it's looking pretty good after that radius block leveling. But you can see how much care and attention it's requiring to get rid of those problems. Now let's try the notes on the G first. We're expecting to hear something. It's not bad at all. Nearly there. Now I'm just going to measure with my fingers where that's choking out. That's a low, high fret just there and there. So we'll do a little bit more focusing on the top end there, because I want those bends across into what I call the G track to clear up. Now this is pretty good considering where we were at, and considering that the action now is very low. But I'm going to push it a little bit harder at this end to even out this bit where the high E gets challenged, because it's coming up the hill into the G track. It's a sort of geometric problem really, and it applies to all guitars, but it's only some of them where you run into that problem. Can be the combination of radius and. So we get to here where these are badly high and they cut out. So I might try a little bit more in this very top section now, but after that I think we're going to have to call the high bends possibly something we're not going to salvage completely at that action. Now the good thing is that we can always raise the action a very small amount at this level, and we can probably free it up. Now I'm hitting it quite hard here because we're on the final few frets. In a way we can afford for them to be, if there are any frets that we can afford to be slightly lower, it's those, in order to solve this problem. But like I say, if we can't get it to play bends cleanly up across into that part of the G, then what you'll find, it's not bad. What you'll find is the tiniest increase down here, say a quarter of a turn down or clockwise, gives you there you go. We're done. I mean, we're done on that bit. That's sorted as far as I'm concerned. We got what we wanted. Tiniest of action adjustments as the final sort of compromise, really. You know, knowing that we've got an unusual circumstances with the original damage and the frets being incorrectly seated. So the thing that might be worth kind of saying, Geoff, is that I suppose when you originally kind of looked or tried this guitar out, there was definitely something wrong with it. And I think it was, by the sounds of it, a mixture of some badly seated frets at that far end, but also a mixture of all of the frets being misseated in regard to an inconsistency between the frets radius and the fingerboard radius. And I think it looks even worse in the middle section, in the center strip of the neck, because that's where sometimes a flat spot in the fingerboard radius really stands out a mile. And then of course it makes your frets seem like they're detached completely when they don't necessarily have to be. Or they can be less out, or less, they can be technically the correct radius, but because there's a flat spot, we think straight away that the frets are badly laid. They might have been, but the flat spot makes it look worse. So we're struggling a bit here. Now again, before I grind away, I'm going to check what we've got as the playing action here, and it is kind of low. So I'm going to, what are we on, the G? Sorry, the D. I'm going to crank this up a little bit, because there's no point me aiming for an unrealistic target. I'm just scraping away at fret metal because I've set it too low, and it is the very, very tiny amounts we're dealing with. Doesn't matter. Okay. So on the D, we've still got some grunge going on up there that's got to be worked on, and this is the consequence of the trouble, the original trouble. But I'm going to just give it a bit more of the harsh hammer in. After which we step back and try it one more time. Now there comes a point where you have to make a final call on it and say, look, I can't save that. There's one fret here, the 21, 20, 19, 18, 18th fret, which is just, this is the one I think that Geoff started attacking in the first place. I'll do a tiny bit more on it, but I think after that, I think we have to accept that we're not going to grind away too much longer at it. And only because when you work on that fret, 21, 20, 19, 18, when you work on that one too much, by default you have to do some work on the ones around it as well. So I'm going to give this sort of a last kick down on this fret. Let's hope we got somewhere with it there. So all the while, part of the brain process is going, do you wish you'd refretted it? I think we'll leave that, right? It's not perfect, but we'll leave it because I don't want to be going on taking fret metal from now until eternity. Yeah, so the question is, do I regret not refretting it? Should I have refretted it? Well, what's true is that it's taken me longer, but it's obviously going to save Geoff money that we're not refretting. But the question is it going to be sufficiently playable? And I think it will. I think it will feel like such a massive difference. Technically, it may have taken a year off its fret life, or 2 years, over 20 years or something, and that's not my fault or Geoff's in a way. That's in part because it came unplayable. It might have been obviously easier if I'd had a go at it straight away, but that's not bad. I'll stop there. And then we're just going to go and do the last one, the low E track, and then we'll be ready for the recrowning and getting this back into shape. And I'll do the recrowning on camera, and then I'll take a break because I'm going to need to recharge batteries before this iPhone conks out, and I need a cup of coffee and a bit of a pause, so I know where we're at now in this process. Whoops. Hopefully we'll put this back on and we're in the right sort of place. Now even then I didn't get quite down as low as some of the areas that were leveled with the radius block. It's not the world's greatest, but it's actually not at all bad. So that's that. That's me done in fret up land. Fret up? Fret leveling land. And you see I'm filthy. So the next stage now is to get off these strings. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these strings. I was just trying to contemplate when to glue in the nut, but actually the nut is pretty fixed in place. I might just hand sand that little bit off, or maybe I won't. Let's see if it comes off easily enough. I don't want to, the fewer times I take this nut on and off, given that it's got this very fragile little repair on it. Okay. So, okay, that's that. I'm going to do a tiny end sanding from the right side. Sam, remember one side is better than the other for this. Thank you. And you're going to do the same on this side, and you're going to come down, up towards it, down towards it, down towards it. Now I'm going to get the super glue that may work, whichever one works. Oh, not that one again. Soon I'll have no choice but to use the little individual ones. But that was the whole point, so that I wouldn't lose whole tins of the stuff, because it's really wasteful. Yes, and it's just literally, even that's trying to glue itself on permanently. So the hard part now is going to be getting this on and pulled down into place. So I've got a D string there that I can use as a sort of an anchor when I want to. I'm going to put a tiny bit at this end, tiny bit at that end, and hopefully a little drag a bit to the middle. Place this in here now, like that along there, get it absolutely flush, and get it to pull down with this thing quickly. I can't see my thing. In. Everything's in. Good. Right, lid on there. It's never an ideal situation, that. I'm never totally happy with how that works, but we do our best. So I'll just try and pull this extra force down here, which I can't seem to do. Yeah, and again, the hard part is you've got a piece of guitar string with a load of coily wire that doesn't want to behave, and then you try and get it into the split part of the tuner, and it doesn't want to go in. By the time you get it in, you know, you're pretty much you're glued and it's set, and you're either in the right place or you're not. So there it is. Right, I think we can call that done. I'm going to get off the rest of these strings. We'll cut them, make things easier. Get through. And then we'll slack these, cut them as well. All right, those off, and now we were going to also look under here, see if we can alter the strange Fender-tastic side to side toggle switch. I'll have a quick look under the covers, see if we can do that, but they may not have made enough room. I know, for example, on things like I think it's the Mustang, Fender Mustang. Is it the Mustang? I think there's no room. The switch can't turn, but we'll see. And if it can't, we'll be left where we are. Now here's a bit more back into the challenging world before we stop the camera. What I'll do once the camera's stopped, once I've done this, I'll off camera. I'll be putting the masking tape on here, and then polishing and sanding and polishing out, so that when we come back we'll be pretty much ready to restring, oil the board, restring and go. But this last bit before that break is the bit where we've got to recrown the frets. Now on this job, as you know already, we have done quite a lot of levelling. Oh god, iPhone storage full. Hold on, I'm going to stop now. Let's take a break now because I've got to re-sort this out. Okay, all the plastic is off. Sorry, I was just thinking, I was trying to work out whether we're going 9s that are already on here or 10s, but I think it's 9s, so I shall go with that. Yes, so we've done all the polishing. I've turned the switch around. There was enough room to do it, which is good. So now, where are you looking at? Oh yes, now I'm going to do put a bit of oil on the fingerboard, and basically we are ready to put the strings on. And after that it'll be a case of setting the intonation, stretching the strings, and then heading off out of here for my few Saturday night hours with my feet up, watching some junk on YouTube, or possibly even playing guitar for a bit, if I'm got the mood for it. So I think we've saved this from the land of refret. You know, there are still a couple of frets that have suffered a bit, as you know, as Geoff will know, because they got a bit bashed in the attempt to put them right. But I think we've got it sorted out, which is great. Okie dokie, right. So I'm just going to load up these. All that plastic, took it all off because I was taking the what do you call them off? What did I take off? I took off the scratch plate, so I took the knobs off as well, so I could get underneath everywhere to get the plastic off, because there's 2 layers of plastic on these scratch plates, and it's very thick, or very not thick, it's very hangs on hard, tightly to the plastic, so it's quite a difficult thing to get off, and it always catches and sticks underneath your pots, or your knobs I should say, and around your screws. So having taken all the screws out to get under there to move the switch around, I thought it was a good idea to just get everything up and take the plastic off once and for all, because it was already peeling off and it just starts to look shabby. But it is a big royal pain to get it off properly, because like I say, it likes to sort of designed, they put the plates on, and then of course they put the knobs on top of that, and the screws. So it's the knobs that are the worst, that hold on to the plastic, worst of all. Okay, so having done the fretwork and having gone about it a little bit of a different way from normal because of the damage that we knew was there, and it was a sort of diagnostic business as much as anything to work out whether or not the guitar was savable or required refretting. So we did it a different way around, and but once we kind of figured that it was savable, it was on to doing the setup after having done the fret level, which was what kind of convinced me that we could get away without refretting. Right, so let's get the speedy upper thing put on here. Right, so we're going to need to cut the strings. So again, for Geoff, as much as other people who haven't seen too many of my videos before, tuning stability is down to two main things. First is the nut, which we've taken care of. We've done three things. We've made sure it's the right material, so it's Teflon with its built-in lubrication. We've made sure by choosing a tusk nut and by sizing it from the bottom upwards, we've made sure that the slots are totally untrammeled, therefore they're not going to be pinching the strings. It's going to allow the strings to run with as little friction as possible. And because I've taken care in setting the nut up, we've got the perfect low first fret action, which means we're not going to get any notes going sharp when played near the nut. So those three key things. I'm going to cut this slightly too short. I'm an idiot. This is what you're always in risk of doing when you do these. What do you call them? These split post tuners. If you cut them, if you miss the one you're supposed to put it in and you cut too short, you end up with not enough to go through. Anyway, yes, so the three aspects of the nut we've taken care of, and the other part of tuning stability is down to the slack in your strings. So having taken care of half of it, which is down to the nut, the other half is the stretch and strings, and we'll take care of that in a minute when these are all on, and then we'll do some extensive stretching to get rid of all that slack. And it's very important to do it kind of deliberately and not just hope for it to happen over time. Because it won't. It'll just stay in the system, and it'll just come out when you least need it to, i.e. when you're playing. So doing this stretching business in front of that will save you a lot of misery. But it's not really even for that I recommend it. It's because I know after many years of playing, go away, I know that the guitars I reach for now are the ones that I've done and made. I mean, it's all of mine now, but it used to be only the ones that had good tuning stability. Now they all have good tuning stability, so you know I can grab any which one of them. Now let's tighten these up a bit. Got some little flies still bugging me in here. This always happens in the first hint of warmer weather. Go away. Okay, so having done the first tune-up, which you didn't see, sorry, focus on the camera shot was terrible. Done the first tune-up. Now I'm going to stretch out all the strings by pressing firmly between thumb and forefinger, and this gets out quite a lot of slack, which some people insist isn't slack, or it isn't string stretching. And I don't really know whether it's the steel or anything. You know, I don't know which bit is giving up its slack, but something is, and that's all it really needs to say. Something's giving up its slack, and that's all we really care about, because we want it to stay playing in tune. Play in tune and stay in tune, that's the main thing. Right, so I've stretched, now we'll tune up again. So all of that detuning would have happened tiny bit by tiny bit over a long period of time as you played the guitar, if you didn't stretch it out in one go. So it really does make sense to do it in one go, because that detuning that you saw on any one string there, that might have been a tone or two detuning, if not more, on the lower strings, and only a fraction of a tone would be enough to put your guitar horribly out of tune on one string, which would spoil all the rest. So you think that you've got hundreds of possible out of tune-ness on 6 different strings. So that's a ton of going out of tune over a long period of time that will just keep on going and annoying you. And all of that's coming from stretch or slack that we could have got rid of in 15 minutes and 3 or 4 of these stretches. Now what you'll find is, what my recommendation is, you just keep on doing it until it doesn't detune any further. And you'll get there fairly soon. And it will be more or less stable after that. Providing, of course, that your nut is right as well. And if you haven't got the nut right, it doesn't matter how much slack you get out of your strings, the nut will put it out of tune on its own. So I'm happy I'm pretty much there for now. Jolly good. Right, last bit now before I slope off for Saturday night is the intonation. And oh, right, that reminds me, I'm going to take home a soldering iron and do that change. I'm going to fit a, what's it called? Treble bleed. I'm going to do it at home, and I'm going to do it by just taking a soldering iron with me and a bit of solder. Instead of bringing that guitar up here tomorrow, I've got another guitar to set up tomorrow, and in fact it's another Telecaster. Checking the socket here, make sure that's okay. I might just double check that in a minute, but I'm pretty sure it's good. So what I do is I just prop the guitar up, get it onto plug it into the tuner, set it to treble, give it as much treble as possible, and then tune the pinged harmonic to E, and then press the 12th fret, fret the 12th fret. Now it looks a bit flat when I fret it compared to when I tune it to the harmonic, That looks okay. There's not much alignment here. They're all pretty kind of bunched up together, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a little bit of differentiation, so that we go for the normal pattern that we would expect in this situation, because it's almost always going to be that way. So to do that, I'm slacking off the one I'm going to adjust, because it doesn't help to be doing it under too much pressure. So what I've done is I've set it up where I think it should be, based on the first few, and then I'm kind of pulling all the other ones into line around it. Now, according to the normal sort of step back or normal stagger of the two groups of 3 strings, that should be about right, but we'll have to tune up. Right, let's go for the B. Good. Yay. Yay. See, my faith in the positions, the normal patterns, pays off. As long as I get the first 1 or 2 right, I can calculate the others. Away. There we are. Done. So that is intonated as per the normal groupings, 2 groups of 3 for the strings that are on here, which are 3 wound and 3 plain. So everything about that, let's double check it. Oh, I was going to just finally check the jack socket, wasn't I? We'll just make sure that's tight before we finish it. We've done everything else. Those things are in good shape. Those things being the strap buttons. Tuner's okay. Nut done. Neck, well, as much relief as we were able to get into it, given the difficulties we encountered earlier on, i.e. the fact that there's no blasted adjustment possible. Am I able to do it with this one? A little bit tighter. Let us go and get the flat pliers. There used to be a thing, but it never worked. It was the wrong size. Kind of a little, the word is I'm looking for, a little, let's hold that there, a little socket thing. So I'm kind of cheating with the pliers here. Okay, that's tightened. Lovely. So it's almost like this is bare wood, but anyway, I think this is a big difference from what it was, and it looks a lot better, and I'm pretty certain that it's going to play a lot better, because these happy with that. Thank you for watching this disjointed video, but it's been an interesting one because of the, the weird nature of trying to, diagnosing it first before getting into the normal setup process. And there you go. So, Geoff, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it plays better than you could have hoped for. Everything is good, ready to go. See you again soon.